Why can XRP reach $10,000? Most people ask that question with a smirk, but the real question isn't about the price, it's about the physics of the global financial system. To understand a $10,000 XRP, you have to stop thinking like a retail investor looking for a moonshot and start thinking like a central banker redesigning the architecture of world trade. The current financial system is dying of friction. Right now, as we speak, there are approximately $27 trillion sitting idle in Nostro and Vostro accounts around the world. These are pre-funded accounts where banks hold local currencies just to make sure they can settle a trade. This is dead capital. It doesn't build schools, it doesn't fund businesses, and it doesn't earn interest. It just sits there because the current system, built on 50-year-old SWIFT technology, is too slow to move value in real time. This is where the $10,000 argument begins. It is not a prediction of wealth, it is a requirement for liquidity. If XRP is to become the world's universal bridge asset, it must be able to move the entire volume of global foreign exchange, which is over $5 trillion per day. On top of that, it must eventually handle the derivatives market, which is estimated to be over $1 quadrillion. Now do the math. If you have a bridge asset worth $1 and you need to move $1 trillion of value, you would need 1 trillion coins. But there are only 100 billion XRP in existence, and only about half of those are in circulation. The math simply does not work at a low price. If the price of XRP remains low, the system lacks the depth to move large amounts of value without causing massive price slippage. To move a $10 billion transaction through a $1 asset, you would effectively break the market every time a bank hit the send button. For the global financial elite to use this technology for settlement, the asset must be a high enough value so that even a $100 billion transaction represents only a tiny fraction of the available liquidity. At $10,000, XRP doesn't just become expensive, it becomes functional. It becomes a vessel large enough to carry the ocean of global wealth without overflowing. This brings us to the first principle of money. Money is just a system for transferring value. For decades, we have been told that the dollar is the only way to do this, but the dollar is a political tool. It is used for sanctions, it is printed into oblivion, and it carries the weight of a massive national debt. The world is looking for a neutral, digital, and instant alternative. This is not about XRP replacing the dollar. It is about XRP becoming the oil that allows all currencies, the dollar, the euro, the yen, and central bank digital currencies, to flow between each other without a middleman. When you look at the $10,000 target, you have to look at the buyback theory. There is a growing school of thought among institutional analysts that the only way to transition the world to a new gold-backed or commodity-backed digital standard is for a central authority like the IMF or the Federal Reserve to buy back the entire supply of a bridge asset at a fixed, high price. Why? To stabilize the volatility. A bank cannot settle a trade if the asset drops 10% in value while the transaction is in flight. By setting a fixed high-value settlement price, the volatility is neutralized and the liquidity is maximized. But let's look at the inertia problem. The reason we don't have $10,000 XRP today isn't because the technology isn't ready. It's because the people who run the current system profit from the delays. Banks make billions of dollars every year on float and fees. When you send money abroad and it takes 3 days, the bank is making money on your capital while it's in transit. XRP ends that profit model. It makes value move at the speed of an email. The barrier to $10,000 isn't math, it's power. To reach this level of adoption, XRP must integrate into the existing regulatory frameworks. We have seen the legal battles in the United States, but notice what is happening globally. Dubai, Singapore, the UK, and Japan are already building the legal pipes for this technology. They're not doing this for hobbyists. They're doing this for the day the legacy system can no longer handle the debt load of the world.
Think about the derivatives market again. This is the everything bubble. It is a massive web of bets on interest rates, commodities, and stocks. When this market eventually needs to be settled on a blockchain to prevent a total systemic collapse, the settlement layer needs to be indestructible. It needs to be fast, it needs to be cheap, and most importantly, it needs to be deep. If you're trying to settle a quadrillion-dollar market, a $10,000 XRP is actually a conservative estimate. Most people look at the market cap and say, there isn't enough money in the world for XRP to be worth $10,000. They're wrong because they're thinking about market cap like it's a bank account. Market cap is just the last transaction price multiplied by the supply. It doesn't mean that much cash was ever put in the system. If the world's banks decide that XRP is the standard for settlement, the price will gap up to $10,000 in an instant, not because people bought it, but because the system revalued it. You must understand the difference between a currency and a bridge asset. You use a currency to buy coffee. You use a bridge asset to move the wealth of nations. The value of a bridge asset is determined by the volume of value it can carry. If the volume is the entire world's economy, the price must reflect that. The road to $10,000 is not a straight line. It is a path blocked by regulation, geopolitical tension, and the resistance of the old guard. But as the debt-to-GDP ratios of major nations continue to spiral out of control, the well-enough system we have today will eventually fail. When it fails, the world won't look for a better bank, they'll look for a better system. XRP is the only asset in the world today that was built from the ground up for this specific purpose. It isn't trying to be a smart contract platform like Ethereum. It isn't trying to be digital gold like Bitcoin. It is trying to be the standard. And in the world of global finance, being the standard is worth everything. So instead of looking at the charts every 5 minutes, look at the infrastructure. Look at the partnerships with the Bank of International Settlements. Look at the integration with the IMF. Look at the move toward ISO 22022. These are the footprints of a giant being positioned. $10,000 isn't a hope for the future. It is the logical conclusion of a system that requires infinite liquidity to survive its own complexity. When the friction of the old world becomes too expensive to bear, the world will switch. And when it does, the price of the connector will no longer be determined by YouTubers or tweets. It will be decided by the sheer scale of the global economy. That is the first principles case for a $10,000 XRP. It is a story of physics, necessity, and the inevitable redesign of money itself. The question isn't whether the math allows it. The question is whether you can see the system changing before it actually does. Don't trade the hype, understand the system, because in the end, usage defines the market and necessity defines the price.